All right, welcome back to Blue by 90, presented by Feldman Chevrolet of Highland. It is March Madness season. We're recording this on Wednesday night before the Thursday game for Michigan, and it feels good. I mean, to be honest, it was St. Patty's yesterday. It was snowing here in Ann Arbor still, which is the usual, but usually at this time of year, at least like March Madness and the weather's turning, the sun comes out, peaks out for the first time in 4 months. So man, it feels good though. It feels really good just to have like college basketball. You were watching the first four last night too, and that was all on. But it's that time of year. I love it.
Yeah, obviously, it's hard to watch every game because you can't have like 6 games on a TV at a time. But it's nice how they got the little the score up top so you can flip back and forth.
Yep.
Definitely, arguably, one of the most exciting times of the year in terms of sports in general.
That's true.
Just a mass amount of basketball, and a lot of times people who like don't watch basketball all year will now tune into March Madness and act like they're super fans, which is pretty interesting. So, going to be a lot of fun. Excited to dive into it. Obviously, Big Ten tournament did not go necessarily as planned. I got to watch a little bit of that as I was sitting in the shade in Jamaica. No man is tougher than the sun, and I am certainly not as well. So
your skin tone doesn't fare well with the Jamaican sun.
No, it does not. It does not. Luckily, a lot of umbrellas there took huge advantage of that. So
there you go. Especially after the winter that we had here, like I had to travel for work to Miami and got absolutely scorched. Went to Cabo for Brad Robbins' wedding as well, and me and Moody and everybody we're just so burnt.
Yeah, but Ray Baker was out. He was out and about, and he greeted me very firmly.
He's a powerful man. But yeah, this going back to the Big Ten tournament, as you mentioned, I think that you watch Michigan all year long. They lose one game in the Big Ten. Only 2 games total, one of them to the actual number 1 team in the country, right? So you feel really good about your team, but then you watch this team in the Big Ten tournament and this offense was not clicking at all. You barely beat Ohio State kind of, and then you lose to Purdue, where I thought Purdue dominated that game, to be honest. I thought that the refs sucked. Guess what? Refs suck all the time. It is what it is. We've benefited from it plenty as well. So, I'm not going to say that that's going to be like, the big thing for that game. But I mean, Purdue's big men, TKR, they dominated. That was the first time I thought that Marez Johnson and Adai Mara really just didn't have an impact on the defensive side.
Right. And I mean, they get into foul trouble early, right? And we still struggle to take advantage of that. I mean, obviously Mara's a really good passer and he was displaying that very well. And they got obviously guys like Braden Smith, who's been there for 25 years. And obviously he's a really good ball player, facilitator, game manager. And yeah, it was frustrating to watch. Obviously, in the first half, we looked solid, and then they started to gain the momentum going into halftime and really never gave it back, which was frustrating to see because it didn't look like we were necessarily playing to win. Didn't seem like we were as aggressive, and we were more kind of panicking the whole second half, which, like you said, we really hadn't seen all year. So that was a little frustrating to see, but, it is March and everybody is – I was thinking about this earlier, like there's a finish line coming and everyone's diving for the finish line. So they're giving their best effort. Obviously, some people are diving from farther away like Ohio State, but, people might say, oh, the rivalry, that's why it was so close. Well, it wasn't like that all year. And Ohio State really wasn't an issue for us. It's just a matter of, let's not make the moment too big. Let's just play Michigan basketball. We've been extremely dominant all year. And that's probably going to be our key going into March, is just to play, stop worrying about what everybody has to say. Obviously we've been a little bit confident, and that has benefited us. And it seemed like lately, maybe we haven't been that way for whatever reason. Maybe you like that, maybe you don't like that, but it obviously worked, right? Like Yaxel, before we played Purdue in the season, he said what he said, and we responded to it, right? We beat them at their place.
That's kind of been the MO all year, though, is like these guys have kind of talked their shit and been able to back it up a little bit.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that doesn't happen that often. Usually you eat your words at least a couple times, Obviously they did on, against Purdue, but, you got to give them credit for beating Wisconsin. The buzzer beater was electric by Yaxel. I think that Wisconsin team is very good. I'd pick them to go pretty dang far in their, region. But you still didn't feel like Michigan played well in that game. It was like it felt painful, and you just barely ended up in the position to win it at the end. But all year long, Michigan was like, no matter what anybody threw at them, it didn't really matter outside of those two games. Like, you go on the road to MSU, you go on the road to Purdue, on the road to Champaign, you have the crazy crowds, these people. I mean, Dusty's sitting on the bench and everyone's MFing him, and they didn't care. They weren't phased at all. And then you walk into this Big Ten tournament and it's like, I think that they kind of tried to sleepwalk through the Ohio State game, to be honest. They thought that it was just going to be like, all right, we're fine. And you have a little rust to shake off when you haven't played in a week as well. And Ohio State had played the day before. Wisconsin, it still felt like it just never felt like they got in a rhythm. And then for Purdue, they just got beat. It was really just like that's what it was. I thought Braden Smith was really, really good. And he, in the battle of the point guards, like it wasn't really close with Braden Smith versus Elliot Cadeau there. So the one thing that I'm, we'll talk about in a second here, like the path and where Michigan's at in the bracket. But the one thing that I'm looking at after watching, I don't want to overreact to a 3-game stretch versus, the 31 games before that. Right. But I think the one thing that I'm looking at is with LJ Kaysen out, where is the rhythm in the offense going to come from? You see it in spurts from Elliot Cadeau when he's running the offense. When he sits the bench, I just don't know that Trey McKinney can run this offense quite yet as a freshman who hasn't, frankly, handled the ball much all year. He's been, an off-the-ball guy. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Of just like, obviously Michigan could shut down pretty much anybody on defense with what they've got. But they're going to have to score at some point.
Right. Yeah. And it has to look different. Like you said, we don't have LJ anymore, and we haven't for some time, so they've had some time to kind of figure that out. And for whatever reason in the Big Ten tournament, they just really seemed kind of lost. Like they didn't know who they wanted to be. And maybe they thought that they were just going to roll through the tournament. I don't know. I kind of find that hard to believe considering the talent in the Big Ten and just the way Dusty May coaches. But I think, tomorrow's game will be very telling on how the tournament's going to go. I know I said this last time I was on here, but I hope that the loss to Purdue is a motivator and they're able to kind of snap back into the fiery Michigan team that we watched all year. So we'll see. I think Purdue also did a really good job of, like, their big men are huge. And so
they were preseason number 1 for a reason. That's because their big men are, some of the best proven big men in the country.
Right. And they're not just tall, but they're like solid dudes. Mara is, more of a lanky guy. And the kind of the issue that we got into is we were doing a lot of switching.
Yep.
And so now our point guards are defending their big men down low, which like is not going to work at all.
And Mara's on the 3-point line trying to guard, like trying to stay with Braden Smith. And that's just never going to work, you know?
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I understand like people having some concern going into the NCAA tournament, but like I said, I hope this is a motivator and that they can come out with that fire. You know, maybe it takes one game to really kind of get that momentum back. Obviously, we got Howard tomorrow, so we'll see how it looks. But nonetheless, I'm still excited to watch them.
Of course. I mean, you got to be excited about Michigan being a 1 seed, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're still a top seed in the tournament. You earn that by playing really, really well all year long. So, you know, I'm always like I'm a sicko a little bit where I kind of love that all of a sudden, like you have a bad 3-game stretch or you lose 1 game. Everyone's kind of writing Michigan off like,
Yeah,
oh,
100%.
they're not going to win their region. You know, there are a couple people that have picked them to go to the Final Four or win it all or whatever. But I think people, you know, watched that 3-game stretch and forgot how dominant Michigan was all year long.
Right. Yeah. And that's just a recency bias, right? Like you see what happens lately. And I don't know. Obviously, Dusty May took Florida Atlantic pretty deep in the tournament a couple of years back, right? And that's a Florida Atlantic team that didn't get to play a high level of competition all year like Michigan has. And so he obviously knows what it's going to take to move through this tournament. And it's full of good teams. There's no mistake in that. And, you know, I think a couple of years ago, right, we saw the first 16 seed beat a number 1 seed.
And it was UMBC, which so I'm glad that Howard beat UMBC just because otherwise that would be the whole narrative of the game, right?
Right. But I did see that. I forget who posted. It was like an upset watch, and they had the Michigan game in there. So, and then I also saw somebody else of favorites to win the tournament. Michigan was the number 1 based on like some analytics. I don't know where those came from.
Right.
So really can't trust anything anybody says. We'll find out. Like we'll just find out as we go along.
Well, that's also the magic of March is, you know, you put in every analytic possible and you have every expert opinion and none of them end up being right. And that's why March Madness that's why they call it madness, you know?
Right.
And so I think that, you know, that it is like you do have to bring your A game every day. It doesn't matter, you know, if Michigan was playing Howard in November and, you know, like nobody's thinking, oh, there's a chance that they could get upset. Right. But you put them in a bracket against each other in March and then they're all of a sudden on, you know, upset watch. Right?
Yeah.
So it just is, you know, it is what it is, but that's the beauty of it. So,
yeah. And I will say, like, so the Big Ten tournament, obviously you've scouted these teams all year. You've played them throughout the year. March Madness is much different. Like you're facing a lot of teams very quickly that you don't have a ton of time to scout. And I think Michigan might play to that advantage just considering the talent that they have. So that'll be interesting to see. Obviously, as you break from the weekend, there's a couple more days to scout the next team you're going to play. Right. But just in terms of, you know, going from a Thursday to a Saturday game, I think they're going to benefit pretty largely from that. So
yeah, and I also think too the big thing that I think Michigan, you know, has an advantage in this tournament is there really isn't anybody else who has bigs that can hang with Michigan. Right? We saw Purdue do it. Obviously, we saw Duke do it with Boozer. But outside of that, like there isn't really any team in the country that has, you know, a 7'3" center, also a 6'10" basically center in Rez Johnson, and then a 6-foot power forward / point guard / whatever you want to call him in Yaks, right? So I think that, you know, the ability to go with that big that 3 big lineup for Michigan is going to be like, there's going to be games here, especially in the early rounds where, you know, Mara, Johnson, and Yaks all have like 20 points apiece just because no one else can stop them.
Yeah, 100%. And I saw that Yaks came out of the Big Ten tournament with a minor sprained ankle.
Yeah.
Don't really think that's anything to worry about. Like, he'll be all right.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's like, thank God it was only minor, because it happened in the last 2 minutes of the Big Ten championship game that really didn't matter to Michigan. At the end of the day, they're trying to win a national championship right now, and that would have been devastating to lose him, in a game that, like, quote unquote doesn't matter. Even though I think it does matter. I think every game matters, but yeah. So I do think that, looking at the bracket here, I don't know what your take was as they were releasing the bracket. It's funny. I have, a couple different group chats that, a lot of guys texted in, and then somebody said, toughest region by far. We got screwed. We got, it's like, wow, we are really, like, it's going to be the hardest path to the Final Four. And then another group chat's like, man, we got an easy draw. So that's just like, that's also how it goes too.
Yeah, it is. I will say, looking at our region, the team I might be most interested to see how they perform is Akron. Akron has won 3 MAC championships in a row, I believe. And now they're in the MAC, and it's Akron. So you like don't really know what you're going to get. They're facing off against Texas Tech first.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's good teams in our region, but there's good teams in every region, and it's freaking March. Like, everybody plays well in March.
Yes.
So,
and anybody can on any given day, right?
Right. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, to be honest, as I'm looking at this, I'm not trying to jinx this here by any means, but I really think that Michigan should get out of the first weekend pretty easily. I think that, obviously Howard, I don't think they should have any trouble with. And then Georgia and St. Louis don't scare me really. I don't think, I mean, I don't know. Although I do think that St. Louis, I believe the Billikens, if I'm not mistaken, great mascot name. If you're one of those people that just pick based on the mascots, and then I think that they have the guy. I don't know if you remember this guy from before, like big white dude that wears goggles.
Yes.
I think that they have that dude. Which, I'll be honest, he does scare me.
He is a little scary. He's one of those big guys who can shoot, which makes you worry a little bit. And he's got the rec specs. Everybody knows somebody with rec specs, and they are typically pretty scary. Actually, Mozzie Smith showed up to Michigan with rec specs. He played with them for like 2 years. We're like,
that's unbelievable.
Got to get some contacts, man. Got to figure this out.
That's so good. Yeah, you're not looking very intimidating on the defensive line. No matter how, you can be the biggest, baddest guy out there, but you put rec specs on the D line, you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and then in the middle of the game, they're like, all right, we're doubling rec specs to the linebacker. So you like immediately are defeated. You're like, golly.
That's so good. But okay, Texas Tech is an interesting one. I think so. Looking at the second weekend, it would be hypothetically for Michigan. You have Texas Tech, who their point guard is an absolute stud. His name is Christian Anderson. Was committed to Michigan since 8th grade for under Juwan Howard. So he now averages above 20 points a game. He's unbelievable. He's been. I remember he was committed in 7th or 8th grade to Michigan and dropping like 31 a game in high school, like on the varsity team. So he's unbelievable. Now, the one thing that they'll be missing is JT Toppin, is their like number 2 guy, and he's hurt now, I believe, for the rest of the season. So they've got a guy out, and then at the Alabama side of it, which is the 4 seed in there, their guy got arrested for having over 2 pounds of weed in his apartment.
Yeah,
which is just insane. So not that you want guys hurt or want guys out because of that stuff, but looking at matchups, it's not a bad thing for Michigan.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Obviously, both of those teams pretty dominant throughout the year. And I think that's why they see the logo, right? And they're like, all right, extremely tough region. But then when you dissect kind of where the team's at now, it's a little bit different than that. And, Michigan is too. LJ Kaysen, right? Not in. But I'm excited. I think it'll be a really good opportunity for him. Obviously, Georgia, not anymore, but previously Tom Crean, head coach of Georgia. He was done there in 2022. If you didn't know this, he is Jim Harbaugh's brother-in-law.
Yeah, fun fact. Fun fact. I always thought about that when it was like when he was at Indiana coaching. I think Harbaugh was early years at Michigan. Just thinking about like Thanksgiving or family, Christmas that had John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, Tom Crean, like all just talking ball. Like those had to be some of the best conversations of all time. Or like wrestling in the basement
around. Yeah, 100%. Those guys and like the Harbaughs specifically are just absolutely dialed in when it comes to X's and O's. Like they love the game of football to an insane amount. Where like if you're trying to talk to Harbaugh about football, like you're probably going to feel a little bit dumb because he just understands so much about it. So yeah, those are probably pretty interesting Thanksgivings. I'm sure his parents were probably getting annoyed at the conversation. Probably not his dad though. His dad was probably in those conversations as well.
Jack is probably hosting. He's probably holding court there. To be
100%.
Honest. That is that's one guy I feel like so honored to be able to have met during all this, because if you ever had an interaction with Jack Harbaugh, it probably went longer than it needed to be because he just wouldn't stop telling a story or talking.
Unbelievable storyteller.
Oh my
unbelievable.
God.
I can't remember the story or who was involved. It was a boxing story that he had told us twice. Now, typically when somebody tells a story twice, you're like, oh, dude, I've heard this before.
Right.
But it was like watching Forrest Gump. Like you're locked in. Like, yeah, you've seen it before, but it's still just as interesting the fifth time. Like to the point where I was sitting in the front row and he was going through this whole boxing story. And he tells me to stand up and he's like simulating the fight. And he ends up like getting about an inch away from my face with a punch. And I was a little concerned because, he is, he's in his older days. So I'm like, what kind of motor skills do we got here? They're still very good. He didn't punch me in the face. I was a little concerned, grabbed me by the shirt, did a little tug and pull there. But unbelievable storyteller. Sorry, we're getting a little off track, but
I know we're on a tangent now. The last thing I'll say on that was the thing about Harbaugh, though, I would love to know about him and like Tom Crean talking, or really just any coaches. He's so inquisitive too that I bet you that he was so dialed in asking questions about like, so when you run the pick and roll, like why do you drop this guy and have, or like how do you when they go into do a 2-3 zone, why do you do this? Like he definitely, like, even though it's not football, he's like, he wants to know the why of like, why are you doing that? And so
he wants to know every single detail about anything. Like we would be installing plays and, if we had, 6 plays to install, we would be on play 5 and all of a sudden he just like, hey, can you go back to play 2? I got a question about this. And then just asking like the smallest detail of the play to just get something cleared up. We're like, dude, you're really thinking back there. Like you're really putting that noggin to work.
If I was the OC, I'd be so nervous every day that I was going to like forget one thing. Like, oh, you're brutal.
Yeah.
Well, for the listeners out there, if you were wondering how this podcast was going to go with me and Joel now, we just turned a March Madness conversation into a Harbaugh story.
Yeah. That's about how it's going to go. We got on Thanksgiving quick, and there we go.
All right, we'll bring it back to Michigan's region here. The two teams that I think I'm most worried about which is who Michigan would meet in the Elite Eight, is Virginia and Iowa State, the 2 and the 3 seed. Virginia just took Duke to the final buzzer in the ACC championship. They played Duke as good as pretty much anybody has all year. So that was impressive. And then Iowa State's just been, I know they play in the Big 12, which I don't think it's very good. I don't know that it's as competitive day in and day out than, as the Big 10 or even maybe the SEC. But they're a really good ball club too.
Yeah. And Iowa State is always like this. Like, regardless of where they're seated, they're always extremely competitive when it comes to March. And obviously Virginia's been good for, some time now. And so it'll be interesting to see that matchup. Obviously, if they make it there, I don't really know much about Santa Clara or Tennessee State, but obviously likely we'll get one of those two. Tennessee still has to have their playing game determined tonight, but Iowa State is like always that team that just shows up in March that everybody kind of forgot about.
Totally.
And then they just show up and you're like, oh crap, like they are the real deal. So yeah, I agree with you on that. That'll be an interesting matchup if it happens.
Yeah, and they've got their 2 highest scorers are their big men. They've got 2 forwards. I don't even know how to say this. Milan Mamalichovic, something like that, and then Joshua Jefferson, which is a lot easier to say. But they've got 2 big men. So that, once you get to that point, it would be an interesting battle between those 2 and, Mara and Johnson and Yak. So we'll see though. And here's my other thing. The last thing I'll say about people talking about how hard or easy it is, on your path to the Final Four. You mentioned it a little bit, but it's the NCAA tournament. They're good teams. That's why they're here. It's because they won a lot of games to get into this tournament. And then especially once you get to the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, the Final Four, it's like those are the best teams. You can be in any region, and sometimes you get Loyola Chicago, right? Like Michigan did in 2018. Well, guess what? They won 4 games to get there too and beat really good teams, So, it's half the luck of the draw, right? It's half, just you're going to have to play and beat good teams if you want to get to the Final Four and eventually cut down the nets.
And some of these teams don't have the opportunity to play like this level of talent, like your Michigans. Yeah. And so when they come to the tournament, they got nothing to lose. And that's kind of where they benefit from. Like I said earlier, I hope Michigan gets back to that point where they just have that fire where they are extremely confident. Obviously, not overconfident, but extremely confident in the sense that they can just go out and play their game to win and not go out there and play to not lose. Because that's in any sport, when a team comes out and they play not to lose is when bad things start to happen. And, so we'll see. It's March. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting. It'll be more fun when Michigan remains in the tournament for all of us here. But
and I will say, so I want to talk about Howard and this weekend for a second, but not looking forward to it. But I just got a text that said Saturday is going to be 65 and sunny out. So we could have ourselves a day on Saturday.
Yeah, we absolutely could. Yeah, we also had snow here. I live east of Columbus. I know that's, contradictory of I went to Michigan, but we had snow on the ground here. It is melted now. And let's have a nice little extended weekend here, Thursday to Sunday. Really for us, Thursday and Saturday matters. So.
Yeah. And so a little plug there. We will be at Hopcat this weekend in Ann Arbor. I don't know how many times you've been to Hopcat. I'm sure you've seen it as you were going into Skeeps back in the day.
Crack fries.
They're cosmic fries now. We can't say crack fries, but
they're cosmic fries.
They are cosmic fries, but they're still the same. They're just as good. But we will be at Hopcat all weekend long. They've got drink specials with Woodson whiskey going on and a bunch more. Thursday, they've even got a burger and a beer deal that's incredible. So we will be there all weekend, and they'll have the games on all weekend. Specifically, we'll be there on Thursday night for the game, doing a watch party. My guy DJ Array will be there spinning, and we'll have a bunch of giveaways. I've got Blue by 90 hoodies and hats and things like that I want to give away. Even some Woodson whiskey merch too. So if you're in the area, would love to come see you. We'll be there Thursday, and then barring a win, we'll be there on Saturday as well. But they'll have the games on all weekend long, so pretty pumped about that. So interesting enough, though, going to Buffalo this weekend is I'm not going to be there, but both Michigan and Michigan State are in Buffalo this weekend. So for the people that are there, a lot of hatred going on in that rivalry. I'm curious as to, what type of – they won't play each other, obviously, but what type of interactions will happen there as well.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, we both are representing the mitten, Michigan and Michigan State. But I would have to imagine that there will still be a lot of hatred and very little support.
It's not – okay, I wanted to ask you this too, because this is more football, but I think it ends up being, pretty much every sport. There's not the SEC like camaraderie where they're, when – I remember when Georgia was beating you guys in 2021 in the college football playoff, they started chanting SEC at us. And I'm like, I don't think we would ever think about starting to chant Big Ten at an SEC.
No one would chant Big Ten. No, some people would obviously talk about it. Oh, Big Ten over the SEC. That's great. But listen, when it comes to Michigan versus Michigan State, there is not any love. There is no love there. No. It is like when I look back to my days of playing, obviously Ohio State, Michigan is a huge rivalry, but it is a very historic rivalry. Everybody watches that game. Michigan State is probably the grittiest rivalry of the season in any sport. Like, we do not enjoy Michigan State. I was talking to a guy by the name of Ben Newman. He's a performance coach, and he posted a video of his office, and he had a Michigan State helmet in there. And I said, hey, you got to get a winged helmet in there.
Yep.
And he goes, no shot. I went to MSU. I was like, all right, man. Okay, whatever. Yeah, fine. You support Michigan State. I'll stay on the good guy's side here. Right. So, yeah. If I see a guy with a Michigan State sweatshirt in the airport, I'm not going to make eye contact with him. I don't want to deal with you. And I think everybody can resonate with that pretty well.
100%. And I think that it'll be interesting to see if Tom Izzo and Dusty May have any interactions this weekend. They, when you're in a city like that, they all work out in the same buildings, right? They're all probably in similar hotels and all that stuff too. So, and then obviously all the fans, I'm sure to your point though, there's no support. Michigan fans aren't going to show up to Michigan State's game and root for them. They might show up and hate watch and vice versa,
right.
But there's not going to be any support just for the mitten there. That's for sure.
No, absolutely not.
All right, let's I wanted to ask you one more thing about basketball before we flip the script to spring football. But if you're looking down the road, who are you worried about for Michigan? That once it got down to the Final Four, national championship, Elite Eight, whatever it is there somebody out there or a couple teams out there that you're like, man, I really think that this could be a bad matchup?
Yeah, obviously Duke has been super dominant all year. I think that's a pretty obvious answer. We played them really close during the season. And if, both of us have the pleasure of meeting in the national championship, that's where we would meet. I think that would be an unbelievable matchup, just considering the tournament experience for both teams.
Yep.
Another team is Houston. Houston is a really good ball club, and I predicted them and Duke to play in the Final Four. So we'll see about that. Those are the two teams when I look at it right now that I'm probably the most, weary of. So we'll see kind of how it all plays out. Obviously, there's a lot of basketball in between those matchups happening. But, yeah, I mean, Duke's the obvious answer just with their tenure throughout the season and just historically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's funny because I don't want to be like, oh, I'm worried about the 1 seeds, but yeah, that's kind of who I'm worried about. Right. It's like they're 1 seed for a reason.
Right.
But, I think that Houston, Duke, Arizona, and this is what I was talking about with Iowa State too. They all work through their big boys. That's kind of how, the reason for, not the sole reason, but a big reason for their success is they've got big men that rebound and they,
right.
they crash the glass and they attack it and all that stuff. And so, I think that's Michigan's advantage, obviously. But, you saw what happened in the Purdue game, is, sometimes they can get bullied on the glass and stuff like that. So I'm looking to teams that have, big men that can possibly match up because, if Michigan doesn't have the advantage in size, I just don't know about the guard play if it's good enough to win a game for them all the time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we lost our facilitator, and we've talked about that, a handful of times. And hopefully, Yaks he wasn't super productive in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah.
And hopefully, we can see a kind of change in that play and see him, play with that confidence. Hopefully the ankle heals up and which it should. He'll be fine. If it's not fully healed, they'll give him a little vitamin T, a little Toradol, and he'll be feeling just fine out there on Thursday. Yeah. But yeah, I think I would agree with you. Anybody who can match up size-wise with Michigan is obviously an area of concern.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing I'll say about Yaks too is what he was so good at all year long was letting the game come to him. It never felt like he was forcing anything. It was like you didn't feel like he was even playing that well. And then you look up and he's got 18 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 assists,
Right.
And so that was what was so great about Yaks all year long. I feel like in the Big Ten tournament, because nobody else was really producing, he felt like he needed to be the guy, and like the offense had to run through him. And that was just, it felt unnatural. It felt abnormal. And so I wonder, how they're going to think about that. And, that would be a concern of mine of like, he's unbelievable, right? If he really needs to get to the basket, he can. And I think that like, Dusty and his staff need to realize that if the offense isn't like humming, they need to just tell Yaks like, hey man, go be selfish. Like you haven't been selfish all year long. You can get to the bucket on pretty much anybody on the floor. Go get buckets.
Right. And make the defense collapse and kick out. Right. We got 3-point shooters. So yeah, I agree. Let's make it happen. Yes. And hopefully with some time to prepare, he can maybe get into the right mindset of stepping into that role of being the facilitator. Now the offense is going to run through him if it needs to, like you said. I think Dusty May's the perfect guy for the job. That guy is so just collected in the way that he thinks. He doesn't get overstimulated or over emotional about anything, which is huge. So we shall see. It'll be fun to watch. Hopefully it'll be fun to watch. I have confidence that it will be, but
I will too. We'll see you all at Hopcat on Thursday and all weekend long. Super excited. This is like you said at the beginning of the show, this is best weekend of the year for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like a collective 4-day stretch, this is the best day of the year. Like first weekend of college football is awesome too. First weekend of NFL, of course, all that stuff. But I just feel like there's not another sporting weekend where you have, where you have from 12 noon to like 12 a.m. multiple games on all day long on Thursday.
Right. It's fantastic. And listen, if you are near Hopcat and you have the capabilities to make it to Hopcat, you might be sitting here thinking, you know what? That sounds like fun. Probably not for me. Enough. Just show up. It's going to be a good time. I won't be there, unfortunately, but just show up. It's one of those situations maybe where you're like, man, that sounds like it'd be a good time. You're not sure if you want to go. I can assure you that if you show up, it is going to be a good time. So show up, support the boys, watch some basketball, eat some cosmic fries now. They're not cracked fries anymore. Sorry about that. But yeah, it'll be a good time.
There you go. I'll say this too. We'll do a little like code word here. Anybody who comes up to us at Hopcat on Thursday night tomorrow and just says Roddy Gale, then I'll give you a $25 gift card to Hopcat. That'll cover, at least a portion of your drinks and food there. So
you got no reason not to go.
There you go. All right. So Spring Bowl has started. The boys are back on the field in Schembechler Hall. It was good to see. We talked about it before, after everything that's gone down with Michigan football in the past couple months, it was just good to see the boys back on the field and start to have something else to talk about here. So it was, it's always nice to see the winged helmet back in action, see the boys suited up again. And Coach Whittingham actually went to the podium for the first time since he did his opening press conference, I believe. So first time at the podium in Ann Arbor with a new, captain of the ship, and so I'm excited. I think that it's a new era. It feels like we've had a new era of Michigan football a few times here in the last couple of years, obviously. But it just seems like, okay, we can turn a page now. And I feel really confident about the job that Coach Whittingham and his staff are going to do.
Yeah. And like you said, it truly is a new era because they essentially cleaned house. I think there's maybe 2 coaches that remained from the previous staff, but it's a whole new staff. They're implementing their ways of going about managing spring ball and workouts and their system that they've seen work at Utah. And obviously, I don't know how they run spring ball. Previously, we used to practice one day and then meet the other day. Practice were 4 hours long. Pretty brutal. Don't recommend that. So hopefully he has a different plan in mind. But it is a great opportunity. Obviously, he's been able to coach now. He's been able to implement his systems, the OC as well. So for those guys to get out there and start running through that and get acquainted to that and playing as a team under that new system is going to be huge for them. There's going to be a lot of position battles in the spring, but I'll say this, sure, somebody might gain an advantage in the spring, but ultimately when they get to August, that's when it's really going to matter.
Right.
If you do really well in spring ball, people will remember it, to a degree. If you do really bad, usually what happens is the coaches forget that happened. Right. It's just the way that it works. So I think more so the opportunity for spring ball is to get acquainted to the new system, a new staff, understand how he's going to coach, and he can understand how to get the players all moving in the same direction. Because obviously that's been a little bit of an issue as of the last, year plus. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited for the guys for that. Obviously, I think there is a spring game. Is that correct? They do have a spring game scheduled?
They do have a spring game scheduled. I believe it's either April 17th or 18th, something like that. Okay. So I'm excited for that too. And I think that, to your point, we're here as we're now, outside of the program, as are you guys, the listeners, for the most part. And it's right now we're it's overreaction season to photos that are posted and videos that are posted on Instagram. Right. Somebody has a highlight catch and you're like, oh my God, that guy's going for 1,000 yards this year. And even, just like quotes from a press conference, it's time to, overreact. And I know Coach Whittingham said Bryce is QB1 1,000%. That was basically his quote. I think that's good. I think that, it's very different from what Coach Harbaugh used to do, where it was like you didn't know who the starting quarterback was until they took the first snap in September.
Yeah,
But
he was the king of beating around the bush. Like he could talk for so long and not tell you a single thing. He was good at it. But yeah, I agree. It is encouraging to see him backing Bryce so much. I mean, obviously, we had a pretty good idea that Bryce was going to be the guy, right? He was last year. He's a $10 million man. Kind of has to be.
Right.
But now we have a quarterbacks coach. We have a developer of Bryce Underwood, extreme talent out of high school, but it's a whole new level of college football. So yeah, I think him saying that is not only reassuring to us as fans, but to Bryce as the quarterback, knowing that he has the full support. There's no gray area, and he can just go out there and play and develop.
Yeah. And so I think too, he's also going to have better weapons, right? Let's be honest with ourselves. I think he's going to have better weapons. Coach Whittingham mentioned Andrew Marsh, Jamie French. He mentioned a couple other guys. So I think that, it's exciting to just say, all right, it's exciting, the thought process of like, hey, we've got elite receivers that can go get a ball, that can, get separation. And then, to your point on the coaching side of things, like, I do think that, I love some of the coaches that were in the building last year, but it seems like they've made a step up. And so I'm excited to see what this offense could look like. Now, what Coach Whittingham also did say is like they're still going to run the damn ball. They're still going to the whole identity of their team and their offense and defense is grit and toughness and physicality and all that. So what's your take on, like, I know some people would say like, all right, like we've got a $10 million quarterback. We've got to open up the offense, but I think that the reality is Michigan football is always going to start with running the football.
Yeah, and it's going to look a little bit different this year. Obviously, Michigan of the past was a 2-3 tight end offense, powerhouse, run it downhill type of team. Coach Whittingham previously has been more of an 11 personnel, so one tight end in the game, kind of air raid type of guy. So what the running game looks like, I'm not sure. Obviously, we have really good running backs, really good offensive line, and tight ends we always have. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like, but it is a necessity. Like, yes, we do have this unbelievable quarterback and extreme talent at the receiver position. Like last year, we had talent, but we didn't know where it was. Obviously, we figured out Andrew Marsh as the season went on. All right, this is our guy. And so to open up the pass game, you have to run the ball. Like that is just general sense of football. I'm sure everybody understands that. And in the same way, to open up the run game, you got to pass the ball. So if we can be extremely dynamic in both of those areas, I think we'll have the season that Michigan fans have, wanted since 2023, just considering the talent that they continually bring in. I'm not sure what the running game is going to look like. Probably, I don't know. A lot of power has been the MO of Michigan. You can run that with one tight end. Outside zone is effective. It kind of sucks as a tight end, but that is what it is.
Yeah.
But maybe we get Bryce running, and obviously last year we knew he liked to run the ball, and he's a tough, gritty guy. So yeah, you can be a tough, gritty team without putting 3 tight ends in the football game.
Right.
Like it doesn't have to be the same.
For sure. And that's what at Utah, that's what they did. Right. They ran their quarterback quite a bit.
Right.
And so, obviously you want to keep him healthy, but I do think that you need to be able to use his legs. He's so quick and fast and powerful. At some point you got to be able to utilize that. And so I think also just hearing Coach Whittingham, like that's his one thing, saying like, we're going to be physical. Physicality is going to be, a main focus of us. I personally love hearing that, because I think we went, you had like the smash thing, but I felt like it was only like in talks, it was
formative.
Yeah. You didn't really feel like in 2024 and 2025 that Michigan was like the mental tough and physically tougher team when they went into those big contests, especially like on the road at Oklahoma. It was deer in headlights, right? And so I think that is like the discipline, the toughness, that even on the mental side, I think that is what Coach Whittingham hangs his hat on, and I'm excited to get back to that, which is, in my opinion, the biggest reason why Michigan won, in 2021 through 2024.
Yeah. And, for the listener who's concerned about Bryce Underwood running the ball, I get it. And we saw last year that he's not a big slider. He likes to try to run guys over. I think that is an issue. I get it. You want to be the tough quarterback.
Yeah.
But you are the quarterback. Like, we need you in the game. So
we don't have another one of you.
Yeah, we need you. So for Coach Whittingham to be able to ingrain in his mind, listen, you have to get down. You have to slide. Like,
yep.
If we're gonna use you in the run game, you're gonna have to slide, because if you're just gonna try to run guys over, maybe he does it every once in a while. He does it to an Ohio State DB, great, like that's fine. But like a lot of these guys on defense, the linebackers are some cinder block head dudes who are gonna want to take your head off. So get down. If he does that, it'll be just fine, and it will be extremely effective, just to have so many different options within the team. So I think that is of huge importance.
Yeah. And one thing that Coach Witt said as well was, which I'm not going to say is groundbreaking for anybody to say, but he said, we expect to contend for a Big Ten championship every single year, and that's our plan from day one. Well, I've heard a lot of coaches say that. There's no doubt about it, right? They always say that. But this is what I believe him. That's kind of what I wanted to get at, is you feel like he is like, no, we are Michigan. This is why I came here. I'm as old as I am. I'm not coming here to, just get one more paycheck. It's like, I want to go and win the damn thing. And so,
right. And he was a lifetimer at Utah. Like,
yeah.
He didn't need to leave. He was going to have the job there until he didn't want it anymore. And so the fact that he comes to Michigan knowing that he can elevate this program, like, says exactly that he is committed to taking Michigan back to 2021, 2022, 2023 Michigan. And he really believes that. And so if he can get the guys to, like I said, align to what he believes, and all of the coaching staff understands who Coach Whittingham is. So I don't think there's going to be any trouble there. It's going to be huge for him.
Yeah, I do. And it just feels like, okay, he is a guy that is, he's not going to meddle. And, a lot of the things that I heard from this last coaching staff is that there was a lot of like, I need to be involved in every single thing that's going on. It feels like right. Coach Witt is definitely going to be like, no, Coach Beck as the OC, I hired you to do your job because you're really right. good at it, and it feels like he's really good at the facilitation of it all, and the, putting the pieces together as well.
Yeah, he's obviously a great manager, and that's really what a head coach is. Like, a head coach typically is not calling plays. Now, obviously that happens with some programs, and we did that at Michigan. My first 2 years, Harbaugh was actually my first year. Harbaugh called the plays, and then we brought in Pep Hamilton. But to just have a head coach that can manage the entire team and not micromanage each position group, like, trust your coaches. You got them there for a reason. And if you truly believe that they're good at what they do, then allow them to do that. Make sure that they understand what your goal is in mind. But yeah, I think he's going to be a great manager. He's been around the game long enough. He's been a head coach long enough that he understands what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, for sure. And just like in the all right, let's get guys to buy into a culture, and let's, I think that was one quote that he had as well, that he feels like he's already got the team bought in, and especially the leaders bought in. That's not easy to do. You're coming in, there are a lot of the same players that were here last year. And so you've got to get them bought into a completely different scenario, right? Completely different people. They, whether as a fan, you liked what you saw or didn't like what you saw last year, most people will say that you didn't. But these players had relationships with those coaches. They loved Wink and Ron Bellamy and et cetera, right? And even Sharon, and so I think that getting those guys bought into like, hey, this is the new system, this is how we do things, these are the new people. That's probably the biggest thing that you can do.
Yeah, and Jim Harbaugh obviously ran a very tight ship in terms of he didn't allow for a lot of BSing around. Like, you were there to play football. So we still have guys on the team from that era of Jim Harbaugh. Now, Sharon comes into coach, and we talked about this before. I think he was, more of a friend first to the players, really tried to push that players coach, and there was some more leniency. My point is that there's really two sides to the players, with Coach Whittingham coming in. You have the ones that are kind of begging for that culture again, that environment of discipline and accountability. And then you have the other side of guys who only know freedom and being best friends with your coach and talking to him about what you did on Saturday night. But the guys that have been there and understand the benefits of actually having a firm culture and a high standard will be able to get those guys, the other guys, to adopt to that, which is going to be huge. I mean, that was the thing that happened with us. We didn't really have a culture, especially in 2020. And then we kind of flipped the script on that, and guys start to buy in. Some guys don't, and they leave, and that's fine. They didn't need to be there anyway. So,
well, and to that point, real quick too, is I think that my bet is that they're weeding some people out right now.
Yeah,
that's kind of my gut take. Is there's probably going to be, that's what spring ball is, and especially with a brand new coaching staff, it's like, all right, who's going to step up to the plate and who's not, and my gut take on how Coach Witt, does his business is like, if you're not on board, man, you got to get out of here, right? Like,
right.
We're not holding our whole team back for just you.
Right. And if a guy, a high-level player leaves because he doesn't like the way things are, he was not supposed to be there in the first place. Like, I know that it sucks, but I played on a team in 2020 that had 24 draft picks on it that went 2-4.
Right.
Like, listen, we're going to have talent, but we need to get everybody under the same roof, moving in the same direction, the same way. And if a guy leaves because he doesn't like that, then that's okay. Like, we don't need any cancers on this team. We need a bunch of guys who love to play football the way that Coach Whittingham is going to run the team. And I think that's the way that it is going to go, right? And there is some weeding out that needs to be done. So don't fret if somebody leaves that you are, heartbroken over. Like, it's probably going to happen. It's okay. It's part of the game.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's going to be a big piece of what happens in spring ball here is the real true leaders of this team are going to emerge.
Right.
And I think that, my gut on what happened last year is there are certain guys that they thought that they were leaders, but, just in that performative side of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's like, okay, who are going to be the real true leaders? Some of them might be transfers that came in. You never know. Some of them might be guys that have been here and gone through it, like a Jordan Marshall or something like that. Right. But, I also think the key to, the turnaround in 2021 was also not only coming from Coach Harbaugh and the staff, but it was even more so maybe coming from it within the players, right?
Yeah.
And you have guys that stepped up and said, listen, this is, this is not just about letting the coaches tell us what to do. We need to tell each other what to do. And so I think that that's going to be one of the most important parts of what happens here in the next month is like, all right, we've been doing workouts. I'm sure there are some guys, that are, I do like the way that Coach Witt, he basically put together like a cabinet of captains. And, it's like, all right, who are these guys that are actually going to step up and say, hold each other accountable and, lead from within.
Yeah. The leadership council.
There you go.
Which is a wonderful thing because it bridges the gap between the coaches and the players.
Right.
Because when you're a, 18-year-old to 22-year-old playing college football, you don't really want to go against what your coach says, but that is the beauty of the leadership councils, because you can address some of those things that maybe you don't like. And to your point earlier, yeah, I think last year a lot of our leadership was coming from the guys who were performing on the field, and that's not always the case of who the best leader actually is.
Right.
Like in 2020, we had a whole bunch of guys who performed well and were assumed to be leaders, but maybe just didn't fit the bill to be a leader. And so to understand, all right, well, which guys are actually unbelievably bought into the system and can make sure that others will also do the same is important. I mean, I stepped into a leadership role and I wasn't nearly the best guy on the team,
right,
but I just had the opportunity because I was bought into what we had going on. And I think that's what he's implementing now. I think the leadership council is huge. Already taken a lot of steps in the right direction in terms of getting these guys moving in the right direction and giving them a foundation. Like a leader of men is what we needed, and that's what we're currently seeing.
Absolutely. So we'll see how this month goes. I'm sure we'll get more players, to the podium, and we'll see some stuff. I'm hoping that Coach Witt is a little more open to the media than some of the past staffs. Going back to Coach Harbaugh, he legitimately thought, I think, there were like Russian spies in every single meeting and in practice and everything. So hopefully he'll be a little bit more open so that we as the fans can see, what's going on and hear about it. Cause that's what you want. You want to be able to celebrate these guys as they're, going through a grind of practices. So we'll see what happens in the next month or so. I'm sure some guys will emerge as stars and then you've got 3 months until you put the pads back on again for real and find out who's ready to play in the fall. So we've got a big weekend ahead. As we said, we'll be at Hopcat Thursday night. Hopefully we'll see you all there. Shout out to Feldman Chevrolet of Highland. Go to feldmanchevyofhighland.com and check out their entire used and new car selection. We've got some great deals going on, as the spring is coming around here. And for us, you can follow us at Blue by 90 on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Blue by 90 Podcast on YouTube, and blueby90.com. We appreciate you. Go Blue.
Go Blue.